Yes, welcome everybody. This is the world's most boring accountant contest. We have accountants all around the world. We're going to find who is the most boring accountant. No, I'm just joking. Let's continue. So as Zhao said, this little session is called CFO Leadership Lessons from the School of Hard Knocks. So where am I? You're in all different places. Well, I'm in Canada. I'm in the capital of Canada, Ottawa, and I'm 9 kilometers from the seat of parliament, seat of government here in Canada. And in Canada, we live in igloos. This is me in front of my home yesterday. We live in igloos in Canada. And I'm just joking. We don't live in igloos, but this is an actual picture of my house a few years ago after a fairly good snowstorm. And 2 of my boys are sliding down the roof into the snowbank. It's so high. But no, I don't live in an igloo. For fun, type the country you are watching this from in the chat, just for fun. Why not? Type in the chat which country you're watching this from in the chat. Now, Giles is in the UK. I was born in the UK. I grew up in the Netherlands before coming to Canada at 4 years of age. And my career, briefly, I was at KPMG for 5 years, followed by several technology companies, usually as CFO, usually as CFO. And I have a little sideline. I've written nearly 300 published business cases. Accounting cases, examination cases, teaching cases, MBA cases, that kind of thing. That's a sideline I do. I do a little speaking in the business world and the accounting world. So my business, before I get into my talk, is SureWeather. We're a world leader in its field. I co-own the company after a management buyout in 2015. And my business has made your flight safer if you've ever flown in winter. Your flight is less likely to be canceled. It's more likely to be safe. And I hear there's some ice and so on at Heathrow Airport right now. I have a system at Heathrow Airport, and it is helping the planes fly safer and less cancellations, less delays. So the company name is SureWeather. And I have systems, fairly expensive systems, about 100,000 pounds in about 35 airports, major airports on the map. And I help people fly at 700 other airports all over the place. So that's what our system, that's what our software does. So if you have questions, type them in the chat. I might respond while I'm speaking. Otherwise, I'll respond at the end. We're trying to aim for about 45 minutes and 5 minutes of questions at the end. So this is lessons from the School of Hard Knocks. Good judgment. Where does good business judgment come from? Well, good business judgment comes from experience. It comes from experience. It doesn't come from school and textbooks. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. So I've learned from bad business judgment during my career to enable later me to make good business judgment. And hard knocks, if English is your second language, suggests difficult experience, life experience. That's an expression for those of you who may not have English as a first language, although so for everyone in the chat, I'm pretty sure has English as a first language. But let's start with a little story. A man in a hot air balloon realized he was lost. So he reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and said, "Excuse me, I promised some customers I would meet them an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below said, "You're in a hot air balloon. You're about 50 degrees, you're in a hot air balloon about 100 feet above the ground. You're at 40 degrees north latitude and 59 degrees west longitude. You must be a controller or a CFO," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but useless. I have no idea what to make of your information. The fact is I'm still lost. You've not been much help so far." The woman below responded, "You must be a CEO, a managing director, maybe a CEO. The man in the balloon said, "I am. How did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You've risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made promises to your customers, which you had no idea how you keep. You expect me to solve your problem. The fact is you're in exactly the same position before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." So there's a few lessons in that little story. Many CEOs are full of hot air. They talk a lot. That's why they got to the top. They don't know where they're going. They blame other people when things don't go well. They blame their accountant. They blame their CFO or their controller or their finance director. But some of us, we have presented technically accurate information. The information is accurate, but it's not useful. useful for users. So we'll give a few tips from experience on presenting more useful information. So just about everybody reports financial numbers. Most of us are accountants here. And the most common way to report is reporting, say, the April number, the year-to-date April, and we compare it to the April of the prior year and year-to-date April the prior year. But if your business is seasonal, that doesn't tell the whole story. In fact, here was a business that has a December year end, and the revenues are the yellow, and it's the end of June. And so year-to-date June is great because we're in the better season. So presenting those kind of typical comparatives don't tell the whole story. So solution is 12-month rolling comparatives. We won't focus just on fiscal year. You show the 12 months rolling numbers ending this month, compare with the 12 months rolling numbers ending the last month, and that totally removes seasonality. You see exactly what is happening in the business. Now, if your budget is not a rolling budget, you have to clarify that versus stakeholders. But there it is. So reporting rolling 12 months, some people call it trailing 12 months, with 12 months rolling comparatives is one of the best ways to see overall trends in the organization. I fell into that one a number of years ago from experience. Few organizations present this way. I was presenting to a group in a European country a few years ago. Not a single person had ever heard of this way of presenting. A little more common in North America, a little more common in agriculture industries, which are very seasonal. It removes seasonality, and it really tells you the velocity of the organization, what is exactly happening. I remember the first time I did this, started reporting this way to a board of directors. The board of directors, oh, that is good, Steve. So if you haven't thought of using that kind of comparative, there it is. How about another one, another useful information? Cash flow information, more useful information. So we all prepare cash flows, rolling cash flow forecasts where we plan to be in the next 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, a year in terms of cash. But here's an innovative idea from experience from an engineer I used to work with. He was my chief operating officer. So he said one day, Steve, do you statistically analyze retrospectively your cash flow forecast? On average, 7 months out, you're 91% accurate or 61% accurate. On average, 2 years out, what's your statistical accuracy? So I didn't do that. But then I started doing that, being pushed by my chief operating officer, an engineer who's a little bit more interested in statistics. And with that information, you can improve your future cash flow reporting. So statistically, retroactively analyze your cash flow forecasting and see if that improves your financial reporting. That's another little useful one. So the report looks like this, something like this. It looks however it works in your organization, where you're continuously looking at the rolling cash flow forecast and seeing the accuracy. Simple one, but a good one to adopt. Technology. Now I'm not so young anymore. I have 8 grandchildren, 4 kids and 8 grandchildren, but I'm still in my 50s, but not so young. Technology is so fast moving. There's so many options. Many options are very expensive. And the techie people at work are always wanting to adopt the new technology, the latest technology, implement the latest thing. But something I learned early in my career in a specific situation. So we were with a company and we had a confused and disorganized order processing department. It was causing me business problems. And someone on the techie side, hey, the solution is install a new order processing system. The solution to every problem at work is a new system, And the chief operating officer, the same guy who gave the statistical idea a minute ago, he said, listen, folks, hold on here. We're not going to throw technology as a problem until when we don't know what we're doing in the first place. So we're in a confused, disorganized state. We will not throw a new system at the problem. We will get organized. We will set objectives. We will talk about the way things should work properly. Then we will consider a new system. So don't be throwing technology at problems all the time. You've got to know what you're doing in the first place. Another way of saying it, my director of IT said this a few years ago. He says, we don't give the fool the tool. The sales department is confused, disorganized, unsuccessful with the solution. Throw a big CRM at them. Find the best CRM, tell them to do it right away. No, I think we're going to organize sales a little bit first and then we'll consider throwing them, carefully implementing a good CRM that fits their needs. Get them organized first. But let me tell you about another thought to come for. I've developed a thesis. No company can be really successful without an aggressive, optimistic CEO. Perhaps for those in the UK, an aggressive, optimistic MD. And in the medium, smaller business world, you can't be very successful without an aggressive, optimistic owner-manager. In other words, cautious, timid, ultra-conservative business leaders don't grow great companies, don't take over markets. So you absolutely need that. Any company that's really ever had a tremendous success in history has had that in place. But someone must balance the aggressive, optimistic CEO, and he or she must listen for the company to be successful. So in terms of balancing, is it going to be HR that's going to balance the aggressive CEO? No. Is it going to be production? I don't think so. Is it going to be IT? No. Is it going to be service? Is it going to be R&D? Is it going to be sales? Definitely not. Sales are usually even more aggressive than the aggressive CEO. Well, I'm afraid it's going to have to be finance. It's going to have to be the finance director. It has to be the CFO. It's going to have to be the VP finance who can balance the aggressive, optimistic CEO. But what does that mean? Well, it means identifying and minimizing risks. They're running ahead without having thought through the risks, without having stress tested the different options, stress tested the different risks. It is shoot down the bad ideas. Shoot down the bad ideas. Many CEOs have ideas and they need to be restrained from them. And keep them out of jail. Keep them out of a jail. Now, obviously, the board has a role in balancing, but I've seen CEOs, I worked for a public company, where the board didn't do a good job of balancing, and that came more to me in the finance role. So let's do, now, in heavily regulated industries, it's a little less important, insurance and investment and so on. But then again, there was Madoff in the investment industry. So even in those heavily regulated industries, that can be problems. Let me give you 3 quick case studies. Anybody ever heard of a company called Enron? The late, great Enron Corporation, one of the greatest accounting frauds of all time. And did we have an aggressive, optimistic CEO? Absolutely, we did. The late Mr. Ken Lay, who was found guilty of all that business and accounting fraud before he passed away. But he didn't went to jail because he passed away. So Enron, did we have a CFO who was a little more conservative, balanced him, kept him honest, kept him out of jail? No, the CFO, Mr. Fasto, also went to jail. So there's a failure to balance at Enron, particularly on the ethics area and perhaps some business practices. Now, Canada's fastest growing startup. Once upon a time, I was the controller of Canada's fastest growing startup. It had 20,000% growth. It was a public company. It was a leading edge in a certain technology for a while. And the CEO was ultra aggressive. But the CFO was also very aggressive. He never slowed the CEO down. He's never disagreed with the CEO. And this company grew fast, tremendous growth rate. And then it started having problems. And the CEO got fired. The CFO got fired. And as a controller, I tried hard to balance them, but I wasn't in the right position to do the balancing. So there's another case study. Another quick case study. Here's a CEO who would listen to me most of the time. A very successful electronic design company in Canada. So let me tell you a story. One day, the CEO was a good-hearted guy, a very good leader, said, we're starting to see some kind of economic crisis, but I have seen companies destroy their value by terminating people in an economic crisis, spend too much terminating people and demoralizing the remaining employees. So I am going to promise a no layoff commitment to the staff during this crisis to give everybody security. So he's about to announce that to all employees. I said, stop, you can't do that. You can't do that. We don't know how bad this crisis is going to be. You want to be a man who keeps your word. We may have to lay people off, we don't know. And you don't want to break your word. Don't make that announcement. And I pushed really hard and the announcement was never made. I kept that back and we eventually had to do a little bit of downsizing during that difficult economic period that some of you remember. Here's another one. Where are we here? So the company was a startup, quickly grew to 100 people and beyond. And he said, Steve, we got to get the company's name out across the city. And an excellent way to do that, low cost advertising without using social media, without using billboards, is to get a giant company sticker put on the door of every employee's vehicle for free advertising. So a very simple way. Aggressive, optimistic, innovative CEO. But wait a second, time for me, the CFO, to balance him. Some of our employees may be bad drivers. They may cut people off on the road. They may honk their horn too much. Some of them may have an old rusty car. So the company's name, that is the company's name, on the road probably wouldn't look very good. And look at my car. Well, I'm just joking. I have had some fairly rusty cars, not quite as bad as that. So I balanced the CEO, and he never did that. So as a finance leader, you have to often balance aggressive CEOs. You want aggressive CEO, but you have to balance them. Let's talk about sales department. The sales department in almost every organization I've ever worked with is difficult to manage. And difficult to manage with respect to following procedures, following the rules, staying ethical, and many more things. A company I worked for before my time had paid a lot of bribes, and the sales department got in a lot of trouble. It was very clean by the time I got there. It had been all cleaned up, but another example of sales. But let's talk about commissioning salespeople. I speak to many hundreds of CFOs and controllers in some other talks I do, and I rarely have met any business that doesn't commission their salespeople on the top line. Actually, let's stop there. One of my worst stories about sales is I'm a Canadian company, I have a small UK sales function where the gentleman worked out of his home office. And one day my controller said to me, the salesperson in the UK invoiced the customer. I said, what? He invoiced the customer? That's impossible. He has no access to the accounting system. And she says, yes, he did. He used Word. Okay. So there's sales not following the rules. How do you know your salespeople aren't invoicing customers in Word? That's a very scary thought for all of us. But let's go back. The almost universal sales practice, sales commission salespeople. They're commissioned on sales revenue. That's how they get their commissions. But that is not the best way to commission people. It's absolutely not the best way. The ideal commission model that ensures bottom line motivation behavior is to make salespeople not a revenue center, but a profit center. So you commission salespeople on revenues, less cost of goods or services, less direct travel that they decide to spend, less entertainment, controllable entertainment, less giveaways. That's an important in some industries, giveaways, less independent rep commissions that may work for them as well. And there it is. So I have achieved this in one company. I'm not saying I've achieved it everywhere. So let's just run some imaginary numbers. On the left, the old style $20 million, $9 million company, and we commission the salespeople on 5% of revenues. But the better way to do it is commission them on their controllable profit center. And the commission basis goes up to 15%. And that is how we motivate people. Now, if you can even get commission on margin, revenue less cost of goods, cost of service, that's better than a top line commission. And behavior changes completely. It improves things a lot. So I haven't implemented it everywhere. It's a tough one, but there's an idea. So let's talk about lawyers. We all deal with lawyers. They impact our business in so many ways, which obviously means we need a lawyer joke. Now, this lawyer joke is pretty bad, but I heard it from a lawyer. I heard this joke from a lawyer. In Canada, they're starting to use laboratory rats. Starting to use lawyers instead of laboratory rats for medical experiments. Using lawyers instead of laboratory rats for medical experiments. Excuse me. Why? You have to ask the question, why? Well, first of all, there's just so many lawyers. The streets are crawling with lawyers. So there's a plentiful supply of lawyers for medical experiments. And number two, lawyers will do things even a rat wouldn't do. There's many things rats would say, I refuse to participate in that, but lawyers will do anything for money. And number three, sometimes laboratory fields researchers feel sorry for the rats as they chop their heads off and poison them and kill them, but they wouldn't feel sorry for a lawyer. Now, of course, there is a drawback. You're not sure if we can extrapolate the results to human beings. would an experiment on a lawyer apply to human beings? Just like an experiment on a rat, would it apply to the human body? That is an important question. But lawyers are very, very risk averse. Lawyers are bent on avoiding all the risks for your organization, particularly in the US of A. We have at least one person here, I think, from the US of A, New York City, where the world is even more litigious. But worldwide, lawyers are bent on reducing risks. They're very, very risk averse. And that reminds me, needs for a story. So does anyone have one of these in the toilet at home to clean the toilets? Here's one for the camera. Guess what the lawyer insisted be on the label of this brush? What did the lawyer insist be on the label of this brush? And we're illustrating the fact that lawyers are very risk averse. Does anyone want to guess in the chat? What do you think the lawyer insisted be on this brush? Okay, sanitary cleaning device. That's not bad. Any more guesses? It's not adult supervision required. Oh, sorry, the funny one, excuse me. The most risk averse one is not adult supervision required. Batteries not included. Not for cleaning your back end. Slippery when wet. It's not that. It's not a Q-tip. Not a Q-tip. But ladies and gentlemen, here it is. Not for oral use. Not for oral use. Here it is in bilingual. In Canada, we speak English and French. Not for oral use. Just in case someone needs to brush their teeth, they can't find their regular toothbrush, and they pick this up and they brush their teeth, and they poison themselves. They die because of other substances on the brush, contaminating the brush, and they die, and their family sues the company. The lawyers are very worried about that. They stay awake at night worrying about that. So not for oral use. So a reminder that lawyers are absolutely very risk averse. So we always listen to our lawyers' advice, whether it be internal lawyers. I work for companies with a lot of internal lawyers. I work for companies, we always use outside lawyers. But we need to remember lawyers are not running your business. You're running your business. Your MD is running your business. Your CEO is running your business. Business people make the final decision. And sometimes you need to overrule them. You need to overrule them. I've seen lawyers pushing too hard in areas and saying, don't sign this. No, we want to sign this contract. Yes, we're aware it's a little risky, but you don't make a good reward without some extra risk. So you need to overrule them. So here's an example where I overrule a lawyer. So the lawyer drafted a very overly complex 23-page threatening agreement, very threatening and scary. And I recognize the other party might not want to sign it, and they would be getting their lawyers extensively involved. And it's just not going to work out well. So what I did is I redrafted the agreement in a short form. Brought it down to 1 page. Take out a lot of the lawyer threatening stuff, knowing that would allow the other party to sign it. But I didn't do that without checking with the lawyer. I've removed 21 pages of what you wrote. Are we at any additional risk? Are we at any additional risk? And the lawyer said, not really. So a lot of that was them generating extra paper, extra legal fees. That's what they were doing in terms of what they're writing. It was also threatening and going to cause me some contractual problems. So that is an issue. That's a good question that pops up. As I said, I won't, some question I may want to take while we're going. So Tom says, sales executive motivation is awfully straight, financially motivated. Is often straightforward financial. And what other motivators do you find work well with sales and marketing? Well, one company, we gave our salespeople shares of the company as a commission. It doesn't work well for tax reasons in some jurisdictions. So they can't feed the family with their shares, but it made them more interested in the overall long-run welfare of the company. And as I said, the bottom line is sales commission. It brings them to think about the bottom line of the company, not the top line. But I do find that some salespeople get a certain satisfaction in breaking in new markets, even if they're not making commissions. But most salespeople are bottom line oriented. I had a CEO one day saying that salesperson is coin operated. So there's a Coca-Cola machine, you put the money in and pops out the drink. This person is simply coin operated. So the only thing that will make it work is a coin. The only thing that will make this salesperson work is a commission, coin operated. So it is difficult to find other motivation, but you can give them bonuses related to the overall performance of the company, customer satisfaction surveys, and things like that. Good question, Tom. And maybe some other people have some useful thoughts as well. So let's keep going here. I developed a thesis. One of my earlier thesis was about balancing the aggressive, optimistic CEO. That was one of my earlier theses. But let me give you another thesis. So my thesis is every senior finance job that you might take may well have skeletons in the closet. Business skeletons, personal skeletons, things that could cause you problems. When you take a new job, there's very often skeletons in the closet, problems in the business that are lurking there that you may not be aware of. Skeletons in the closet. And these skeletons could be accounting skeletons, income and value-added tax skeletons, systems skeletons, systems problems, that is, inventory skeletons, financing skeletons, banking skeletons, internal control skeletons, HR skeletons, environmental skeletons, legal skeletons, payroll skeletons, and more. There are often skeletons in the closet. Even with public companies, a public company I've joined, I had a number of skeletons in the closet. In fact, let me tell you this, skeletons are guaranteed, pretty well guaranteed, if your predecessor missed their skeletons, they're still hanging around. If your predecessor got fired, if your predecessor quit suddenly to take a new job, if your predecessor was incompetent, if your predecessor was doing a fraud or was unethical, if your predecessor was hiding things from people at work, which often happens in the business world, if your predecessor got hit by a bus, was incapacitated, or was killed, there will be skeletons in the closet. If your predecessor was the fourth person in that position in 2 years, there are skeletons in the closet. So there's all kinds of situations where there are skeletons in the closet. Now, if they weren't a licensed accountant, I earned the Canadian CPA, CA, CMA, and CGA designations. So I have my licenses, but suppose they weren't licensed accountant, there's a good chance there's some serious skeletons in the closet. If your predecessor got arrested and in jail, there's guaranteed skeletons in the closet, guaranteed. Now, I should add that if your predecessor was very competent, had been there a long time, and shows their retirement date and how retired, there's probably no skeletons in the closet. If your predecessor moved down the hall for a different job, probably not so many skeletons in the closet, but most of the above things, there's going to be skeletons in the closet. Very important. And number two, you have a few weeks grace when you take a new job, and none of the skeletons can get you in trouble, and you can't get any blame. You have a few weeks grace when that happens, and then just after that few weeks grace period, all the problems are yours. All the skeletons in the closet are yours. So you need to find out all the things that could burn you later during this first few weeks on the new job. So let's give you a scenario. A CFO I knew, he was newly hired, and the skeleton in the closet was weak bank internal controls over bank and cash. And there's a continuing fraud with significant thefts. This gentleman takes the job. There's the skeleton in the closet. So if, for example, he finds the skeleton in the first few weeks, or the bank finds it, or someone else finds the skeleton in the closet and uncovers the fraud, there's no problem in the first few weeks. But if he doesn't find it, it's a big problem. So what actually happened is he didn't find it. It blows up about 2 years later. The fraud blows up and he gets fired. The reason being, you've been here for 2 years. You were incompetent because you couldn't find the internal control problems, and we just don't want you anymore. He was fired. So the point is, you gotta find all the skeletons quickly. And I could give you lists of hundreds of skeletons that I found as an auditor, that I've found as a CFO or controller, or that people I know or people I've taught in different courses have found. Wrong accounting estimates, revenue recognition, wrong accounting is a huge one. I joined a company, the consolidation was done completely wrong. Like we have to completely redo the consolidation. Tax returns not filed, perhaps in foreign jurisdictions where they weren't aware. Inventory problems, costing, valuation, obsolescence. There's so many areas where inventory problems can result in inventory issues, business issues, and accounting problems. Inexperienced accountant dividing foreign exchange instead of multiplying. So they take, what is it? 1 pound and divide by 2 to equal US dollars. Instead of multiplying by 2, that's not quite the number, but they do it every time differently, wrong, and add that up after a few years, huge problem. Here's another one. Someone said they found the owner's mistress on the payroll. There's a skeleton in the closet. A skeleton in the closet. So just for fun, I'm going to hand out a Canadian prize to the first person, I'll have to mail it, I'll have to ship it, a Canadian prize to the first person who types a skeleton they found in the closet when taking a new finance job. I will ship you a Canadian prize, you get a Canadian prize, and why not a great Canadian toonie coin, except it's chocolate. It's chocolate. It's not solid silver, solid gold. It's a great Canadian toonie, a large, exaggerated size, chocolate toonie coin. So if you ever found a skeleton in the closet when you took a new job, particularly interesting, amusing, rare one, type it in the chat. In fact, the first person who does it will have to type in the chat. And to get this prize, you have to contact me on LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn is in the conference session, or you can look me up, Stephen Priddle. So there it is. So Kevin is the winner. So Kevin, make sure you contact me through LinkedIn. Kevin jumped in, he's listening. It's good to see people listening. We don't get the camera on, so I can't see everybody who's awake. But accounting, all kinds of accounting errors Kevin found. Thank you for participating, Kevin. So let's talk about finding the skeletons. Now, one of the first things I would say before I talk about this slide is you need to talk to your predecessor. You need to talk to your predecessor. And if the predecessor's down the hall, not only there's probably no skeletons, but they'll tell you everything that's going on. Suppose your predecessor got fired. And I'm half joking here, you call them up and say, hey, I took the job after you. Can I just have a little chat with you? How are things going on? Any skeletons? If your predecessor's in jail, what do? Well, you go visit the jail in visiting hours and said, hey, I got your new job, your old job. Do you have any advice for me? So talk to your predecessor. But you got to get out and about. Get out and about. Accountants who sit in the accounting office, the finance office, don't get out in the field, in the remote offices, in the plant, in the R&D lab, don't really know what's going on. You got to get out in the field, ask, why is this inventory so dusty? That obviously hasn't sold for 2 years. You got to ask the questions. And another important thing you need to do, the biggest thing I worry about, one of the biggest things I worry about is financial skeletons, accounting skeletons. There's one guaranteed way to ensure there'll be no write-offs, reversals, restatements that worry all of us as accountants. There's a guaranteed way. It's called prove every single account, prove every single account in the balance sheet. You got to nail a balance sheet. You got to tear the balance sheet apart. You've got to prove the statement of financial position, every single account. Are the liabilities correctly stated? Are they overstated? Are there been some accruals that need to be reversed? Is the inventory valued properly? Is the subledger tied in with the general ledger? You've got to look at every single account, prove every single account. And in this new job, it will be a great exercise in you understanding the business, but it will also help ensure there's no accounting restatements, reversals, and write-downs. Another tip is you got to make it very clear to your staff that everything must come out. So one of the best sources of skeletons is your accounting team. So let me just do a brief little skit here. Slightly exaggerated, I don't act like this in real life. So hi, my name is Steve Priddle. I'm the new CFO of the company, and good to be here to start working together. And I hope to make you successful and this company more successful. Now let me give you a very honest thought on this first day in the new job. I happen to know that sometimes things get swept under the carpet in the business world. I happen to know sometimes people are told to do things and they don't do them. So for example, if my predecessor told you to reconcile such and such a GL account diligently every month, and you haven't done it for 16 months, you need to tell me today. Suppose you have this nagging suspicion that Pedro in the purchasing department is getting a kickback scheme going, getting some money under the table from suppliers. You just had this suspicion. You have no proof. You've never shared it with anybody. Today is the day to share with me, because I'm offering an amnesty. No matter what you tell me, no matter what you did wrong, apart from criminal activity, I'm offering an amnesty. You won't get in trouble, but you need to tell me everything today. Because if a skeleton in the closet blows up in my face, or the tax authorities find it, or the auditors find it, that you did not tell me about today, I will not be a happy camper. But I want to know everything today. In fact, I'd rather know about skeletons in the closet from an anonymous note, perhaps about Pedro and purchasing, than not know about it at all. So I've got to leave the meeting now, folks. This is my talk with my new finance team. But I have booked 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock with nothing on my schedule today. My assistant made sure my schedule is clean. So if you feel like coming to chat with me about anything, anything that's on your mind, along the lines of what I've said, you can come and see me. And you don't know what may come out from your staff. My best first day confession, if you want, not exactly confession, was a public company I worked for, and a junior person, a clerk, informed me that the controller who reported to me had forged at least one check. She never told anybody. It was an awkward situation, but she disclosed it to me on the first day, and it turned out to be true, and we had to let the lady go, and it's a long story. So get all the skeletons in the closet from your staff. But what about a few different angles? Check with HR legal before you do this. You got to review your predecessor email account. Okay. You got to review your predecessor's trash can on their computer, trash can in the corner of their office, not to mention their shredder, especially if they got arrested and went to jail. You could find some interesting things that will help you uncover skeletons in the closet. Another thing you need to do is a vacation analysis. I don't know how many times you and I have heard of a fraud where the person never went on vacation, covering something up. They were intercepting statements. So they could not go on vacation because they're covering up a fraud. So I'd quickly look at all vacation records of people associated with cash, or who might be an opportunity to get their hands on money. Do a vacation analysis. And after you do a vacation analysis, you should do the parking lot review. The parking lot review. What is a parking lot review? Well, here's a junior accountant who drives a 100,000 pound, 100,000 US dollar car. Now, there may be a very good reason for that. They won the lottery. They got an inheritance. But it may be just worth to keep that in mind in terms of their lifestyle not matching their income. We're not accusing them. We're not being suspicious, but we're being more alert. The parking lot review. And even the lifestyle review. Someone has a house that just doesn't match. You may want to be a little bit more aware. Another good way to look up to uncover skeletons in the closet is review manual journal entries. So manual journal entries tell the story of error corrections. They tell the story of lack of automation. They tell the story of funny stuff. They tell the story potentially of fraud. So manual journal entries reveal a lot of different things. And lack of automation means you need some new system improvements. Lots of things can be reviewed or learned as a new senior finance person from manual journal entries. How about some more different angles? Well, listen to this one carefully. Talk to some mouthy, opinionated, long-serving, disgruntled, unhappy employees, not just in finance, especially the receptionists. So you need to get out in the field and talk to more different people. And you like opinionated, mouthy people. Shy people will have no useful information. And long-serving people have more information. And if they're a little unhappy with the company, they're more likely to talk and give you useful information. And yes, you will have to filter it all. There may be some gossip, there may be some exaggeration, but you will learn some good things. And the receptionist, everywhere I know work, the receptionist knows more what's going on. They know about funny things, funny arrivals, funny departures. the receptionist knows what's going on. So make sure you talk to the receptionist at the different locations. And you may uncover skeletons in the closet, you may uncover frauds, and you may just get a nugget of information that will help you in your job. So you're in the purchasing department, and Fred in the purchasing department says, you know what, Steve, I've been here 14 years. Not a single person in this group or in the rest of finance has been here longer than 7 years. And you know what, 11 years ago, the finance director at the time tried to implement this change in the system and it didn't work. And you say, thank you. I made a note of that. I was actually thinking of making that change in the system. So we'll need to talk more, but I'm glad you told me. So that's an example of corporate memory, someone with some good, valuable corporate memory. Good, valuable corporate memory, excuse me. Now a bonus tip, talk to the cleaners. Talk to the cleaners, the nighttime cleaners. Who's here at odd hours on the weekend? You ever see people taking boxes out? Just have a little word with the cleaners. You might find some interesting skeletons in the closet. And finally here, find the secret file. Find the secret file. Sometimes there's a secret file in a company that represents a huge skeleton in the closet. It could be a paper file, it could be a cabinet. It's more likely to be a folder on the server these days. A secret file. You got to find the secret file that represents serious skeletons in the closet. So I know someone who said they found a file called Hide from the Auditors. Hide from the Auditors. Okay, there's a file you would best find on the first day in the new job. This represents the accounting skeleton in the closet. Hide from auditors. I uncovered in a not-for-profit I was advising an off-book executive pension plan. The off-book executive pension plan. Someone else I know found a bribe file. I joined a company, and at the time, based on the accounting rules, someone told me about the secret lease bargain purchase option file. So based on the accounting rules in Canada at the time, the regular lease, or as an operating lease, not a balance sheet lease, for accounting and tax purposes, as long as you didn't know about the secret file, which had a bargain purchase option, which made them capital leases for tax and for accounting. So it was a hidden secret file. Hidden secret file. Another one that sometimes out there is called side deals by sales. Side deals by sales. Sales is having a conversation and said, look, with the customer, why don't we do this special deal? We won't tell the controller. We won't tell contracts administration. This is a little bit of a side deal, but it has accounting implications and tax implications and a whole bunch of business implications. You got to find the side deals. Someone else said they found something called a list of fictitious entries. A list of fictitious entries. Someone else said they found a secret inventory location. And maybe it's just an unusual folder on the server, which needs some special investigation. So remember, closing point here in this course, 45 minutes is up, is always remember to find the secret file when you take a new job. Because I've been burned by these, and this is some good tips. So we're just up about time up. Do you have any questions? Questions in the chat, questions through Giles. So I hope you got something from this session, a session from experiential hard knocks, not the kind of things you read in textbooks. And I do a little accounting speaking sometimes through my website, practicalpd.com. So I'm a bit of a CFO and speaker as well. So thank you. Are there any questions?
Lovely. Stephen, thank you so much for that. Really insightful talk. I guess a couple of the key takeaways being watch out for skeletons and always do a thorough audit before your probationary period as a CFO is up, otherwise it's on your head.
Absolutely.
Let me dive into a couple of questions that have come through. We've got a few minutes still. First one's from Kevin, who asks, there's a fine and often, oh no, sorry, I believe you, did you answer that one? You didn't, sorry, you did the sales and marketing one. Kevin asks, there's a fine and often blurred line between an aggressive and optimistic CEO and an unruly and unrealistic one. How do you define or identify one from the other? Okay, so so on the bad side is the unethical. So there's a fine line between these. So you want to, especially to be honest, you want them to be willing to listen to other people. You always, as a business leader, want to have people who are willing to say no.
Someone once said the best advice an entrepreneur, who tend to be particularly stubborn, is the best advice an entrepreneur can have is hire at least a few people who say no to you. So all CEOs should be willing to at least listen to people saying no. They don't just totally overrule them. And some of the most stubborn and eventually in jail CEOs that have ever been around just wouldn't listen to anybody. So I don't know if that answers the question that well, but there is a fine line. Somebody once said to me when I was teaching this material, 10% of CEOs are sociopaths, right? That's almost like a psychopath. And somebody said, private equity always want to hire us this kind of CEO, but on the wrong side, way too aggressive. So there is a fine line. But the CEO I talked about, who I was able to balance, he was super aggressive, super innovative, but he would listen to me when I said no. And the CEO of Canada's fastest growing startup didn't, and it cost him his job. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. A question from Steve, who asks, how do you absolve yourself from skeletons after your grace period? As a CFO, you are expected to have fully audited. Are you expected to have fully audited every aspect of the business within X months, and everything after that is on your head?
It pretty well is. I think the key message there is you got to find them in the first few months, first few weeks. Now, if I went to a company that had a giant inventory mess, and I come in there and I say, this is going to take 6 months to figure out the inventory mess, I would spend some time emphasizing to the CEO, there are skeletons in this closet, and it's absolutely impossible for any living person to identify them all in 3 weeks. So they're could popping out in 5 months, and they are my predecessor's problem. But I'm afraid it's just the way it is. After a few weeks, pretty well skeletons are yours. You cannot avoid it. That's why the sort of audit is so important, that special audit that you do at the beginning.
Brilliant, thanks. And Peter has not got a question in there, but I think it leads on to a question I can ask. And Peter's got an interesting or similar story. Many years ago, I was doing a routine stock count as an auditor at a paper factory. I noticed a lot of dust around most of the spare parts, which I was counting. I probed the storeman whether these are ever used, and he looked at me with ridicule and said the machine that these parts are being kept for has long been decommissioned. In fact, the company that has manufactured the machine no longer exists. The parts were in excess of $1 million on the balance sheet, and it turned out they just never had them off. They never took them off to avoid the P&L impact. I guess the question we can lead off from that is, what would you do in that situation? What would you recommend?
Oh, yeah, so that's definitely, you got to write it off. It has zero accounting value. There's no discussion, and obviously being missed deliberately or not. But it illustrates my point. Get out in the field, look for the dust. The dust tells you a lot. Tells you hasn't moved. You always ask lots of questions. But I like that example.